Stephen Wilbur, and I want to talk to you. I'm going to start a series on principles of musicianship. And as a pianist, a classical pianist, we all know that there's a big difference between just playing the notes and being a slave to the score, so to speak, and playing all the jots and all the little staccatos and everything properly. And there's a big difference between that and how we play as a deep musician. When we first learn the music, of course, we have to do the accents. It says loud, it says soft, it says crescendo, and our teachers point that all out to us. And to me, that's one part of being a musician. That's one part of playing the music properly. But the second part, which is the deeper part, is following the deeper rules of musicianship, which are not necessarily printed on the page. It's those things, there are no markings. A lot of times we'll play a piece of music and we'll follow the softs and we'll follow the crescendos and we'll do what it says, but it still can sound boring or plain. And people might not be interested when we play it like that. And of course, when we're learning and we're younger pianists, we have to do that. And there's part of becoming a musician where you learn these deeper musicianship concepts. And what I'm trying to do is bring attention to these ideas and put words to them, concepts, umbrella terms. And these terms are things I've created, and you could create your own terms. But for me, this is what I use. And there's such a large variety of different musical ideas that we have and concepts. For example, some people say be organic, or make the phrase linear, or don't always accent the downbeat. These are things that we learn as we grow up as a musician, and we listen to teachers tell us, but we don't really know what they mean. And they don't necessarily tell us what to do when we come across the same idea in the next piece. So what I want to do here is I'm going to bring to light some ideas on terms and apply them to a phrase. I'll play the phrase out for you, and then if everybody likes this, if this is something that could be done in the future, I'll do this weekly or every other day. Or you can give me ideas on what kind of a phrase you want me to play and talk about. But this is one of my favorite things. And of all the things that we talk about in music, one of the most important things we talk about is how to shape a phrase, or the art of playing a phrase, how to make a phrase musical. And most of the things that make a phrase musical, we see the things on the page, what's listed, what's told to us, but there's more to it than just that. And I'm going to bring you 10 or 11 different concepts that I personally would say help make a phrase shaped properly. Now, just because we're talking about phrasing and shaping a phrase, it doesn't have to be only the main melody of a piece. Everywhere in music, if it's not the main melody, it still has to be shaped. It's still some sort of a phrase. So, let me see what I have here. I have a list of 10 things I'm just going to read off to you quickly, and then I'll talk about them individually. There's delineating the phrase, there's mountain chain shapes, starting the phrase, matching tones, there's amplitude of the phrase, there's the tempo, which affects the way we shape the phrase. There's the high point, or the most important part of the phrase. There are vowels, where we open up and play some notes longer, the vowels of the phrase. There's reaching tones in a phrase. There are non-chord tones in a phrase. And finally, there's the cadence of the phrase, or the ending of the phrase. Those are 11 things. Each of those in its own right is a concept or a way to explain parts of shaping a phrase, and we could spend days or hours just on one of those. What I'm trying to do is take a simple phrase, something that's very obvious, play it for you, and then talk about each of these 11 things. Okay, so I'm going to play a short phrase which is 8 measures long from a Haydn Sonata number 50 in C Major, the second movement. I'm first going to play the 8 majors, and you can just listen to it. Talk about is delineating the phrase. Where does the phrase end and begin? How many measures is it? In this case, it's 4 plus 4, 8, which is a very common classical thing. Romantic music, classical music, 4 plus 4 is 8. Sometimes it's irregular. Once we've delineated the phrase, I want to talk about how do we start the phrase. Every phrase that you can find, any phrase that has a beginning, can only start two ways. It can start louder and diminuendo, or get softer, or sometimes get louder, but the other side of the coin is it can start soft and grow into something. People call it organic. If you take a magic marker and you hold it too long on the paper, it makes a big round dot, and then you would keep going. It would be a dot, then a line. That would be like starting a phrase like this. See how it gets softer, loud. The other way to play a phrase would be if I went, see, soft, loud. Those are two options. This is the downbeat, it's a quarter note, and it says sforzando. It doesn't even have to say sforzando. The fact that it's a downbeat, it feels strong, it starts loud. The next thing I would like to talk about is, I'm going to cover these quickly because I don't have time to cover all 11 in terrible detail. But in the future, I could spend more time on a particular concept and talk about it more. We're going to talk about the shape of this phrase. Now, all phrases have shapes. If you took the measures, you lined them up in a straight line without any bar lines, you would just see a bunch of notes going like this. And they make shapes like a mountain chain. Now, the two different types of mountain chains are the flatter types of mountains, like the Appalachians, and then there's more peaked or jagged mountains that look like this, and those are the Rocky Mountains. If you look at the shape of this phrase, notice how much up and down there is. There's a lot of distance from low to high, so it's more like the Rockies. So it's very sing-songy, up and down, up and down. So we were deciding that there's a lot of high and lows in this phrase. Some phrases are much more straightforward. For example, this phrase from the Schubert Wander Fantasy. See how the notes are very in the same place. There's not a lot of up and down. So once we realize that there's a mountain chain shape, we want to find out how to match tones. Now, matching tones is probably the single best concept that you can use to become a great musician. If you can apply matching tones to everything and understand how it works, your music will be much more understood and much more musical. And all I'm saying with matching tones is we're going to create a chart, sort of like on a calculus graph. Amplitude, longitude, 0 to 10 or 1 to 10. So 1 would be soft, 10 would be loud. So I'm just going to play a scale, and I'm going to gradually increase the volume of each of these notes, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. All of our music, when we're playing phrases, we don't want to hear many of this. Like all 3s or 4s. It's the kind of playing that someone like talks like this. You know, you've been in your math class. Okay, students, we will be talking about X and Y and Z and algebra. You're asleep, right? Well, music is not like that. Yeah, music is a speech. Music is a language like speech. It has, in a sentence, today I woke up, I went to the store, I got some coffee, and I came home. Makes sense. I had a beginning, I had an end, and I relaxed. Well, musical phrases are like that too. They're speaking in musical tones, but they have a beginning and end, and they make sense. But in between, there we go, up and down. Today I went to the store and I bought some, no, today I went to the store and I bought some coffee. Or I bought some coffee. I brought it home. So we make inflections. Now, part of what makes a different musician more interesting than another is the way they inflect the tones, the way that they decide to accent certain notes. But there's a sort of a common philosophy of musicianship that's basically understood. We aren't going to do ridiculous things today. I went to the store and bought. Nobody would really talk like that. Yes, it's interesting, but it's not common and it's not normal. So most people would speak, today I went to the store and I bought some coffee. Today I went to the store. See, that doesn't make sense. So we have to make some sense of this. And one of the things that makes sense is matching the tones between the beginning of the phrase and the end. And in somewhere in there, we're going to have high points. The high point, usually the loudest, the highest note, an interesting chord, a non-chord tone. And those are some of the things I wrote down. A non-chord tone, a reaching tone, a high point, a loud point. So let's look for that. Let's just go for the first 4 measures. Right here, this is in measure 3. And by the way, speaking of the loudest, the most important place in a phrase, there's a philosophy behind that. It's just not some random place the composer says, I'm just going to put the loudest note here. In the unwinding of a story, or a play, or life, in movies, books, the climactic part, the most important part, is usually not in the middle, like a McDonald's arch. It's not so symmetrical. If you look at sonata form, for example, you have an exposition, a development, and a recapitulation. And one of the most important things about sonata form is the retransition when the first theme comes back in the recapitulation in the original key. There's an angstly moment there where it's tension and it relaxes. That's around 60%, 2/3, 66%. There's a Fibonacci series. 1 plus 2 is 3, 2 plus 3 is 5, 3 plus 5 is 8. That's basically 2/3. The Fibonacci, the golden rule, is very important in nature and life. Well, in music, most of the time, you're going to see the important part, the high point of the phrase, not in the middle. And so if you look at these first 4 measures, it starts happening in measure 3, beats 1 and 2, which is roughly 60% plus. And as we build up to this high note, we have to learn how to make the notes make sense. So I'm just not going to go, this ending of this F, the way it dies away to the C. I can't go, I'm listening to the F as it gets softer, the C has to match it. So if I play this really fast, if I let it die away, now listen to the C. We're judging. Musicians are judging all the time. How fast, how slow. Is this note compared to this note? We're always judging with our ears, just like when you go down the street. Am I running faster than this guy? Is that tree taller than that tree? Is that house look bigger than that house? That's a judgment. It's kind of ridiculous. We don't really need to do that. But those are things we do instinctively. But here, we're consciously doing it. We have to. If we want to be a great musician, we have to think about everything we're doing. So, let's just talk about matching the tones in this first few measures. F is soft here. Now when the C finishes, this A, I have a rest. So however loud the C is, I have a rest which allows me some extra time to let that C die away. Even though there's nothing sounding, the C is fading from my consciousness. So this A comes out of nothing and grows up to the F. Like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in volume. I can't go. If I did this, see the notes are all random, like an EKG machine. It doesn't make sense. We want them to have a contour and a shape which is matching. So we call it matching tones. We're matching the volume of one tone dying away to the next. So soft, loud. Now the loudest or highest point of the phrase doesn't have to be one single note or one beat. It could be a couple beats, a couple notes. So this high F, it goes down to E, to the G, back to F. So it's circulating around this note F. So this F note is being taken care of by going below the note and above the note. So we need to keep the intensity. If I did this, see, there's something emotionally lacking there. But if I keep the intensity, now it gets softer. Another slight high point. That's the end of the first 4 measures. So we had a high point ending here. Now the second 4 measures, it starts like the first. Listen. See, I'm matching this tone. Okay, what is that? That's a non-chord tone. In the key of F, there's no C sharp. So this C sharp is relaxing to a D, which is a chord tone. So I have another theory, a philosophy about non-chord tones, and you'll hear me talk about this a lot. Non-chord tones are ugly. If you listen to this, relaxing, the sharp is a non-chord tone that's ugly. It's a dissonance, and it relaxes to a consonant. And one of the things I like to say, and it's sort of goofy, is I'll tell my students, you know, I like to bang my head on the wall. Well, why do you like to bang your head on the wall? And I say, because when I'm done, it feels really good. Of course, most people would say, well, if you never banged your head on the wall in the first place, it would always feel good. But I say, by banging my head on the wall, I feel the pain so that I know and enjoy and appreciate so much more the good feeling of when I don't bang my head on the wall. And it's pretty absurd, but that's life. If everything is just plain consonances, plain vanilla, you know, red isn't so red or white isn't so white without black juxtaposing it. The contrast is what makes art and music and things really work. The variety of colors, the variety of sounds. And we need the opposites of something to help each other seem more important or have more incredible effect on our emotions. So this non-chord tone, this here is more understood. If I just went, that's like a plain vanilla ice cream cone, but this, chocolate sauce, peanuts, cherry, whipped cream, back to my vanilla ice cream, ending the scale. The cadence, in this case, is completely relaxed. And then after a second it goes. Sometimes a cadence can relax and elide or connect immediately into another phrase, in which case you can't really relax. But in this case you can take time. And two, and see, a little bit of space to help us collect our thoughts. We just ended a phrase like, I just went to the store, I got my peanut butter and eggs, and I'm home. Now I'm going to relax now. And then I'm going to go to play baseball. Okay? So this is my end of the sentence. So what we did is we're learning to shape the notes. We're finding out the high points of the phrase. We're seeing how to connect and make the match get to the high points of the phrase. Some notes are more important, non-chord tones, high notes. And we learn to relax the phrase. Now this is something that you can apply to any parts of music. It takes conscious thought, but there's more to being a musician than just conscious thought and those 10 or 11 concepts I have. It's also having an intuition about the emotional state of the music. Clearly, this music, if you have to call it, it's not bouncy, exciting. It's not really sad. It's seriously beautiful and simple. And our 1 through 10, the volume of that 1 through 10 has to take into consideration the emotional content of the thing we're playing. So this 1 through 10 would be different than if I was playing something by Franz Liszt like this. That clearly, 1 through 10 is a much bigger 1 through 10 than this much more simple, relaxed type of music. Very operatic, very singing. Another thing I talk about in phrases is that phrases tend to be linear and melodic or motivic. Linear and melodic are things that are more singable and long-lined. Motivic tend to have little chunks and rests. This tends to be a linear, long line. Mozart is very long linear. Haydn, a lot of times, especially in his faster movements, is very motivic. So that's another thing to think about. So I hope you can understand how I'm approaching music. This is just approaching how to shape a phrase. I have other conceptual terms, umbrella terms that I like to use in relationship to how to understand music. One would be called local or regional. Another would be called merging between sections. I didn't even get to talk about the vowels. Singers sing on long open vowels like I love you. Not I l. Oh, you can't sing la. You can't sing t, t, t. It's today. So in piano speaking terms, because the notes decay fast, this you can't sing. It's not an open sound to ring for a long time. I have to find long notes. So right here, there's a long note, fast. Now this dotted 16th is not very long of a note, but compared to the 30-second notes before it, it's long, and it gives me ample time to open the phrase just a little bit. So here's getting open, louder. What if I just went? That's not emotionally giving. It's like the Grinch. It's like, I don't love you, I'm not going to give you my love of my music. No, we have to be open and indulge in the musicianship. This note, this long note, those longer notes have to be spoken. So I call that the vowels of music. Playing the piano on the vowels. So I hope you enjoy my little presentation, and I could talk about this forever, and every kind of piece of music, every kind of phrase, and every melody can be talked about in this manner. Some may not apply all the concepts, but a lot of them will. So if you have any questions, please write me and I will try to make things more clear. Thank you.